Today's guest, Kamal Bengougam from Eversys. Welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be on the show, and I must admit to being a bit nervous because I've never done anything like this before.
Well, you're breaking your virginity with regards to this kind of stuff. I'm glad you're doing it here.
I certainly am.
There are worse places to do that. I promise you. I promise to take good care of you, and we're just going to have a conversation. So
Excellent.
there are lots of things that I want to talk to you about. We live in very interesting times. We live in very challenging times, and you are in an interesting intersection in the industry where you get to observe a bunch of different directions. And I think that you bring a unique perspective to the situation. So I think that that's going to be really exciting for us to unpack. But before we get into that, why don't you tell us all what you do and where you're from and how you fit into this complex matrix that is the coffee industry.
So the one word that you're right about is complex.
Yeah, right. Ain't nothing easy about it right now.
It's quite interesting. I was having a conversation this morning in central London, and I was saying that at times like this, I feel I'm in the autumn of my life, and this is a good place to be. And sometimes, you think back on your life and you think, am I satisfied with where I'm today? And my life became a few decades ago. I was born and raised in Paris, France, from a French mother and an Algerian father. I then grew up in North Africa. So that was, again, a steep learning curve, little French boy, living in Africa. And that was fantastic. It taught me a lot about people. And so the whole of my life, I've lived around people from all over the world. So then I went to university in the US, which was also a great experience. And I've lived now in the UK for the last 25, 27 years. And that's another experience. And I get to travel all over the world. So for me, the world is a small place. It's an extraordinary place, and there's diversity, and I love all of it. So this is my background. I'm a businessman. I work with Eversys. I'm the group commercial director. So I started not long after the company began. So I came in, and my role is very much the commercial role. So everything to do with sales and marketing and concepts and strategies, things like that. And the company is based in Switzerland. We have an amazing team, a very young team with a lot of ambition. And it's been an amazing journey to be part of that team and to start from really zero, almost just over 10 years ago, to be where we are today.
I have a confession to make. I don't usually like marketing people. I don't know. Did I tell you that? I don't typically like marketing people at all. And you and I got on right off the bat. You're a very unusual marketing person, I got to tell you. And look, no disrespect to marketing people. I think the problem that I have with marketing is that marketing is about tricking people into buying what you've got to offer. And I don't like that trickery part.
It's not that, Lee. I think you've got multiple. You can't put people into categories. So in marketing, let's assume you have two types of marketeers. You have those who value form over substance, and those who value substance over form. So to me, those who value form over substance, they just, send messages that have no substance. And I think, to me, eventually you get found out. Form without substance is totally meaningless. So to us, when, for me as a marketeer, I'm a communicator, and I tell people the truth. I tell people my truth. I tell people what I firmly believe, and then let them make their own mind up. So I lay out the facts. I tell them how I see those facts lining up and what they mean to me. And then after that, I give them the freedom to make up their own mind.
And that's where therein lies the difference, Kamal. Because while you say that there's two different camps, I agree with you. However, there's a disproportionate representation of one camp over the other. And I think that's a lot of why when you and I started talking, I was pleasantly surprised because I've tasted coffee from an Eversys machine before and the product delivered. I was very impressed. And then when I wanted to find out who were the people behind this, I got to meet Ilya and I got to meet you. And the one thing that I'm a no bullshit kind of person, that's no secret. And I don't think there's anybody in the coffee industry that would disagree with that statement. I was pleasantly surprised to find out that both Ilya and you and Daniel, the people that I've spoken to from Eversys, will also know bullshit people. But if you're going to find the bullshit in a company, it's usually in the marketing department, right?
It usually is. And I was fascinated to meet you because I was always looking forward to find someone that Ilya would like. And you're the only person I've met so far, apart from his daughter and his current girlfriend, that he actually likes. So that was a revelation to me.
Well, I'm going to take that as a deep compliment because he's a cool human. He just is a straight talker and I enjoy that.
He is. But the thing is this, people think that marketing is basically distorting the truth. And it isn't. People who distort the truth are poor marketers. They're poor communicators. A really good marketing person is someone who tells it like it is. Someone who has no need to distort the truth. If you have a good product, you don't need to distort the truth. If something tastes good, it tastes good. If you tell someone that it tastes good and it doesn't, then you eventually are the fool in your story. So I really think, but today we live in a world where form far exceeds substance. You see it at every single level of society. You see it
now more than ever, right?
Well, I stopped looking at politics because politics today has become a form of entertainment as opposed to, the burden of leading a nation. So I think to me, marketing is an extremely complex task. And it's the task of communicating something complex in simple words and doing it in a very diligent and truthful way.
Do you think that simply being truthful in marketing is what determines the longevity of a brand success?
I think over the course of time, yes. I think most people make decisions in the short term. If you look at the Japanese business model, their window used to be 20 years. In our modern world of investment, people are looking for quick returns. And I think, it's like if you observe nature and the seasons, everything is cyclical. Everything has a time. And I think that to me, there's a time to reap and there's a time to sow. And you can't speed up any of those processes. It needs to take its time. So to me, marketing is about telling the truth, telling it in a simple way. And if you want to build a brand that has longevity, it needs to be based on foundational values. It needs to be based on honesty, on truth, on integrity, and passion.
That's an interesting concept. Do you think that brands have... Let me take a step back. Ultimately, it sounds like what you're saying is that brands need room to breathe in order for their messaging to get across if they're basing that messaging in truthful messaging. Do you believe that in today's society, not just brands, but in general ideas and exploring when we fuck up, having the room to breathe as a brand, as a company, as a human, do we have the room to allow ideas to evolve?
It's more difficult today because anyone can take, you have fake news. This is the era of fake news. And how do you believe that something is true or not? You have to test it over time. You also have to have the grace to allow people to make mistakes, because as humans, the only way we learn is through those
Yeah.
mistakes. We need to give people the space to breathe, to make mistakes, to recover and have another go. And brands are no different, because to me, I see the Eversys brand as a person, and in my mind, that person, I know what that person wears, I know the perfume that person wears, I know the language that person speaks. It's actually a human in my head.
Do you think that that's changing now that the world has changed and the industry has changed forever? Does the avatar of Eversys change?
I don't think so. I think that the substance of what you do must be consistent. You can't be something and then become something else, morph into something totally different. I think you can evolve, and that's what that breathing leads to. There's always room for change and evolution and adapting to a new reality. But I don't think that intrinsically you change. Your values must remain the same, your passion must continue to be there, and whatever you deliver needs to be holistically consistent.
That's been an interesting thing that I've observed in watching this year. I was going to say this crisis, but it's just 2020, right? It's not just one thing, it's many things. As I've watched this year unfold, it's been fascinating to observe the brands that just stayed consistent because they had their values steeped in things like integrity and compassion and empathy and community, and understood what those value statements were. Whereas those companies that didn't understand what those value statements were and meant were evolving and reacting to different things. And so if the mob, the group, the fake wokeness demanded that a business react a certain way, they would react that way if they weren't clear on what their values were. Does that make sense?
It does, because one of my favorite writers is Stephen Covey, and Stephen Covey spoke about a moral compass, knowing where your truth always was. And I think this is a challenge today to know if there is a true north, because there's so much distortion of what truth is. Where do you know where north is? And sometimes one has to take that compass out and determine where it is that you go. Because if you don't know the direction in which you go, you may not get to the destination that you aim for.
Do you, as a marketer, that's a really interesting concept, because my big struggle with marketers has been, particularly when they're working with bigger companies, that their version of true north isn't always pointing in the same direction as the company's true north.
That is true. But I always say to people, if you believe that there is a creator in this world and he gave you 2 ears and one mouth, he, she, whatever, it, yeah, well, I think it's, but
I had to pull you up on that one, I've got to say. Especially as today's episode of the Daily Coffee Pro is about strong women in coffee. So
yes, we won't talk about Santa Claus then. So to me, 2 ears and one mouth, that the first part of being a good marketer is to listen, not speak. And to basically, it's a bit like tuning your heartbeat to the heartbeat of your client, not imposing yours, but to listen to what your client's rhythm is, adjust your listening to their own breath, and then deliver back what you hear. It's not about distorting and creating noise, it's about giving them back in words or images what they think. People talk about the values of a brand. And to me, authenticity is when those values are aligned with the way you live. There's many people who make promises through their brand, and there is a huge chasm between what they say and what you actually see in practice.
every brand in the world right now is being challenged to stand up to those values. Do you think you guys
Yes,
are being...
so.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that for us, I always believe that, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember many
It's
things.
so true. It's so true.
So our brand is quite simple. We deliver great solutions, we're innovative, we're passionate, we believe in sustainability. There are no lies. So when we go through hardship, and a friend of mine used to say, you are who you are under pressure. So under pressure, people reveal their true nature. And I think that Eversys under pressure is Eversys the same as it was last year. Obviously we have to adapt to a new situation, but our values don't change. Our true north remains true north.
I believe that we have been remiss in mentioning that Eversys is what Eversys does. So Eversys makes...
That's a good question.
We just made an assumption that everybody who's listening knows what Eversys does. Could you explain what Eversys does?
Well, we're a Swiss company and we manufacture, what the world knows as automatic coffee systems. We're now evolving in our brand, and we call them super traditionals. Why do we call them that?
I'm
And
keen to hear the answer to this question because I don't know that you're super traditional. And so as the marketer, I'm fascinated to hear where you came up with that.
Well, I came into the coffee industry not having been in the coffee industry before.
Yeah.
So I came with fresh eyes. And when I spent time, the first 6 months, traveling the world, and I realized there were two distinct worlds. There was the world of the traditional machines, and there was the super automatic machines, and they each had their values.
Yep.
And then there was this huge gap in the middle. And I remember speaking to our founder, Jean-Paul, and I said, Jean-Paul, what makes you different than the rest? He says, well, even though we are in the automatic group, we make espresso like the traditional. And I said, well, why don't we move towards them and fill the gap in the middle, which we call blue ocean? So we then did this. And about a year ago, I was with our chairman, Martin, in Shanghai. And he said, well, if we're filling that space in the middle, we need to give it a name. And I was thinking, oh yeah, so we've got super automatic on the right, traditional on the left. Why don't we call it super traditional? And then the question, well, what does it mean? And a good friend of mine, Adam Carr from 7 Miles in Australia, he says, okay, Eversys is calling their machine super traditional. What does it mean? And I think the big difference between a traditional machine and a super automatic machine lies in the aesthetics. I think the gap between the sensory gap has been reduced. So we're launching a new range of machine that we call super traditional, where we've actually brought in the aesthetic element, the sensory, therefore providing solutions where the consumer sees very little difference between the two worlds.
And I just want to mention before we move forward, this Eversys is not a sponsor of the podcast. So this is this is not a sponsored podcast. So the podcast.
I thought you were paying me.
Sorry, say again.
You were paying me. No.
You are severely misguided in the idea of where things are at in the world, sir. So this podcast, this brand turned 3 this month. And since the beginning of this brand, we have been talking about the fact that our industry business model is broken and that we have to stop cutting the amount that we pay staff, and we have to stop cutting the amount that we spend on coffee, and we need to look for better ways to create a better business model. And marrying that idea with the idea that customers want a different experience in cafes now. It's my genuine belief that that's the case. I've been talking about for 3 years that the future of what we're going to do has to be automation. And so, just to be clear, for everybody that's watching, if you're a regular listener of the Map It Forward podcast, this episode comes as no surprise to you, because I have been talking about automation forever. And I think that there are some great things that have come out of 2020, and I think an acceleration of us having to change the business model is one of them. We're being forced into that, and I think, excuse me, I think that what you guys are doing is incredibly interesting. And I wanted to have a conversation with the person who seems to be mapping the marketing for how this is going to roll out. And then we had a conversation, and I'm like, okay, this person is not a typical marketing person. That's different to what I expected. And I think I vocalized that to you at the time, that I was quite surprised after a couple of hours of talking, right?
You did, but the thing is, we all carry expectations about other people. And more often than not, those expectations are not accurate, or they may be distorted by what we believe. We make assumptions every day about things that are not true. And when you walk around the world with an open mind and you realize that actually you may not be as right as you think you are, it gives you freedom. It gives you freedom to experience a brand and people in a new way without prejudice. And to me, when I came into this world of coffee, super automatic machines, it was like a dirty word. There were those plastic machines that made crap coffee. And they are all shaped the same way. It's like a cube. You put it in a corner and it's efficient in terms of design, but had nothing like a curve or any noble metal or anything shiny. And, let's be fair, we all like toys. We like pretty things. So I thought, well,
there's the marketer.
I was talking to my team. I said, well, why don't we make it pretty? And they said, well, what's wrong with it? And I went, oh. Because you look at a Mac and, a PowerBook is plain. It's just a rectangle. Okay, they use beautiful metal, but it's gray, and it's a plain thing, so it's functional. So you have to think, what really matters? Is it just function, or does the form, the design, and the color matter? And I think because coffee is such an emotional product, and I believe it's like looking at art, you utilize more than your senses, because even though you may be listening to music, you watch a concert or you watch a beautiful painting, you can almost hear the whispers of the story that was created, that was live before a painter and then ended up on a canvas. And to me, this is the fascinating part, is to ask yourself those questions. If you're eating something, you think, well, it's binary. You think this tastes good, this doesn't taste good. But why don't you ask yourself the next question? What does it taste like? Does it remember me? Because all of those tastes and smells and images make memories that go into your mind. And at times come out and surprise you.
Some people would say that automation is going to mess with those memories and the sensory experience and all of the romance around coffee. What do you say to that?
I am an eternal romantic, so I say. And I'm going to tell you why. At the 20th century, when the first automobile came out, people said, we don't need automobiles, we just need faster horses. And we ended up with the automobile. Did it destroy romance? We have beautiful cars, we have convertibles, we have all sorts of things, and cars create emotions and the speed and the exhilaration of what a car brings makes you forget about the horse. Yes, riding a horse on the beach is also cool, but so is driving a car. And I think it's people's perspective of what an automatic machine is that may not have romance. But then the question is, what is romance? And I think romance, to me, in any situation, is when you create an environment that is conducive to intimacy.
When you create an environment that is conducive to intimacy. So the baristas are saying, you're getting rid of me, so you're removing me from the intimacy.
We don't remove the barista at all. Our machines, the non-self-service machines need to be operated by a human. So I think we're challenging the barista to basically redefine romance. Romance is not about making noise and then a little doodle on top of a cup. Romance is engaging with another human, creating intimacy. And you don't create intimacy giving people a product. You create intimacy by engaging in a conversation and making yourself vulnerable, like we are now.
I remember the second episode of this podcast ever was with Matt Perger. And I remember, shout out to Matt. And I remember when Matt had started talking to me about automation at the time. And he said to me, I think the role of the barista is going to change. I think that baristas will become more like coffee concierges and stop having to do the mechanical stuff that machines can do better. Do you think that's the basis of where the role of barista is moving?
Well, I think we're making a lot of assumptions here. I think firstly, we assume that all baristas are equal, and they're not. And second, if you break down what a barista does, most of what a barista does today is what Matt calls factory working.
Yeah.
Very repetitive tasks.
And that's where he was going with, like, leave those tasks to the machine so that you can spend the time doing what a human should be doing, which is connecting with the customer, talking to them and informing them about coffee, helping them have a better coffee experience.
Yes, if you look in my work, I delegate all the mechanical duties to other people that can do them far better than me. Mm-hmm. What I do is I communicate. So I communicate with words, I communicate with you, I communicate with clients, because I think this is where my gift is. And I think people should major on what their gift is. Mm-hmm. I think that the role of the barista, first of all, is not the same in all settings, but I think it will evolve. I just, I go to coffee shops all the time, or I go to restaurants all the time.
You used to, anyway.
Well, I still do. Here in Europe, we can go
all
to
right,
coffee shops.
Stop teasing. Here in America, we can't go anywhere.
I don't know if you could hear me, but we can still go to coffee shops.
Yeah, no, we can't.
The thing is this: when I go to a restaurant, when I was a student, I was a waiter, and we used to do table service. We taught how to do flambés, how to bone a fish, how to do this, and to me that was real theater, where you. Now you go to a restaurant, and in the US, you give them a 20% tip for just taking your order and bringing your plate. And you think, well, is that a skill? And I think that, to me, I don't want to lose the waiter. I don't want to lose the sommelier. I think it's part of that whole romance. They create intimacy based upon some knowledge. You see, so the sommelier's role is not to open the bottle without breaking the cork. That's part of it. The key part of what he does is to recommend the wine, to tell you a story about the wine. And I think in coffee, the role of a barista is not just pushing a button that grinds the beans and temp. Everybody can do that. The machine can do it more consistently than a person. But I would love to be able to go to a coffee shop and have a barista tell me about the coffee, the story of the coffee. We have a coffee shop in London called Roasting Plant. I love it. I go there, and then you have the different types of coffees you could choose, and then you could say, I want that one because this is the story, and I relate to that story. I can feel the emotion of that story. I feel I'm in a bubble of intimacy, and I want to be in that bubble of intimacy. I want to be romanced.
I want to explore that idea with you, if you don't mind, because you have been in coffee. Is it 10 years you've been with Eversys?
Yes.
Okay, so you've been here a good chunk of time in the industry. But what I find very interesting is that you care about the romance of that experience. My experience, having been a professional head barista for 15 years, was that most people want to come and get their cappuccino with 2 sugars and then fuck off to work.
If that's what they want, then they can use an automated solution. Then you can say, okay, there is room for multiple solutions. You don't have to have just
Right.
a tiny where you have one thing. I think it's like everything. Sometimes I don't want to go, like tomorrow night, I'm taking my wife out to London. We're going to Michelin star restaurant. I don't have that every night. This is just a one-off special occasion. Last week, we sat in a beer garden and just had a pint and a plate of chips. So, everyone has different moments in their
Yeah.
life. But I think that to me, if I'm on my way to work and I want a quick coffee, I'm quite happy to have him from an automated solution. And if I want to sit down and create intimacy and have romance and I'm with somebody else, I'm not in a hurry, I want that experience.
I think, as I'm hearing you talk, I try to think about, like, if I'm going to a cafe and I want to know about the coffee that I'm drinking, I get nervous to ask most baristas because I don't want them to feel like I've exposed a vulnerability. Even though I'm interested about the coffee, to ask them, can you tell me more about this coffee? Right now, the way that our industry is, the majority of baristas wouldn't know how to talk about that.
Really? But to me, if your job is to do something, you have to become expert at it. You have to be good at it. And I think that's what I meant before.
Yeah.
You have different levels of baristas. I mean, I have been very privileged to meet some amazing people.
Oh, and there are some very, very good knowledgeable baristas out there.
Yeah, Fred Storm, Gwilym Davis, people like this. You speak to them. It's like speaking to an encyclopedia of knowledge. They will tell you the detail of things, and I'm fascinated by knowledge. So to me, when I came into the industry, I didn't know anything. But guess what? I spent the first 2 years keeping my mouth shut and my ears open. And I only started talking when I felt I had enough information to say something that was maybe not as stupid as it would have been prior.
Cheers to your knowledge, experience, and your education. Rarely do I get to have elixir with someone on the other side of the world during a conversation, so cheers to that as well.
It is my pleasure.
I'm glad you're enjoying it. I think that a big part of the problem is that we have such a low barrier to entry, and we have an unclear path and definition of what we should be expected to do as baristas. This lends itself to the idea that all coffee shops are coffee shops. All coffee brands are coffee brands. All baristas are baristas. And because we have no barrier to entry, we don't really have a standard that we're required to adhere to. And I think that
Correct.
does us a disservice as an industry and a profession. Do you agree?
I agree, but that's in all professions. To be a waiter in a restaurant in the US, you just need to be able to, to walk between the kitchen and the table. You don't have to know anything about wine. You don't even have most of the time to know the soup of the day because you can go and ask the chef. If you go to a restaurant in France, a waiter is a profession. They know everything, everything. I was in Paris last week on business, and you're in a restaurant, and you order something or you ask them something, and they say, "Would you like? I recommend this wine." They know everything because they've been doing that job for 20 odd years, and that's their profession. It is a profession. It's not just a job to take you through college. It is a profession.
Yeah.
And I think a barista should be the same. If you call yourself a barista, it's not just about pushing a grinder and brewing and then making a nice little design at the end. It's about having
I think you
in-depth
just
knowledge of the.
insulted like 50% of the people in our industry by I'm joking, obviously. And I agree with you. I just need to clarify that the nice little design at the end.
Well, you need to be able to do more. Although I have to say that last year in Shanghai, using an Eversys machine, we did a barista competition.
Uh-huh.
And I'll tell you what some of the people were able to do in a single cup. It was like creating a whole zoo, not just
As
an animal. It was big. And I thought, how do you do this with milk? I mean, it was
I
amazing.
have to
Amazing.
introduce you to my friend Jibby. Jibby is a superstar. Jibby Little is a superstar with latte art. She is fantastic, yeah.
I mean, I see some of those things and I think this is like
A
an
zoo in a cup.
artist.
That's
Okay.
hilarious.
I think it's amazing what they can do with this, but I think there is more to that story. If you speak to the top chefs, they can't cook. They understand the nature of ingredients. They speak about ingredients like they gave birth to them.
Yeah, wow.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
When you speak to a top chef about different types of salt or different types of garlic or whether you use smoked garlic in a recipe or this or they know everything. They look at meat and they look at meat and they can tell you this is not good, this was dry aged, this is the type of knowledge that to me separates, the top echelon of baristas to that middle
Yep.
grade. And I have huge respect for that top echelon because they do know their craft. And I think being a barista is a craft. I think some people make it a job when it should be a craft. If it is just a job, then don't bitch. But
Right.
if it is a craft, then full respect. Have the stake.
Yeah, it's like the difference between a bartender who just
Yeah,
does it on the weekends for a bit of extra cash
which is
versus,
okay.
which is fine,
It's okay.
versus a sommelier.
Yes, but then you can't have the same name. You need to
Therein lies
have
the
different.
problem.
Yes, to be a sommelier, you need to have a diploma. And let me tell you, it is not easy because it's like in the coffee world, you have to be a Q grader and you have to remember not just every grape from every country, you have to know all the years. The good years, the bad years. I collect wine, and to me, it's a passion. But the knowledge some of those sommeliers have is extraordinary. But I have like friends in the coffee world, roasters. Last week I was with Hippolyte Courty in Paris, and he has a company called La Vraie Café. And when you speak to him about coffee, it's like a maestro. It's like a magician. He will bring like little bags like this. That's all he's got from a small little parcel of beans he got from Rwanda or Ethiopia or Guatemala. And then he roasts it and he treats it like his baby. And he makes you this amazing product. And I think I don't mind sitting at the altar of someone like him because it's spectacular. It's a privilege to watch.
It's interesting to dissect what portion of the market is interested in that and what portion of the market is interested in, excuse me, in just drinking their cappuccino with 2 sugars.
I
And
think
Go ahead.
I think there's two distinct markets, but someone said to me, everyone, if they were honest with themselves, want to drive a Ferrari. So that's the aspiration of everyone. So I think, to me, everyone wants theater, everyone wants romance, everyone wants intimacy. What we do sometimes, we don't allow ourselves the vulnerability of time, where we actually take time to do things.
Okay.
Take time to savor a dinner because we're in a rush to go somewhere. Take time to savor a cup of coffee. We just drink it on the run because we're in a hurry. And the question we should be asking is, why are we in a hurry? Are we too busy? Did we wake up late? Are we putting too many things in a day? Are we disorganized? What is it that we could do to give us that space? And I wrote an article a little while ago about the power of decision. And I always said the key to making a good decision is leaving a gap between a question and an answer. So always question yourself, if I have to rush to have a coffee in the morning, why don't I get up half an hour before and then savor? Like, I travel all the time. I was up on Monday at 4:30 or 5:30, but guess what? I never leave my house without having had my coffee. Never.
Do you
So
think,
I earlier,
sorry, do you think that the world is changing their relationship with coffee in that way now?
I hope so. When people talk about, if you're in Africa and you see the way they do coffee, they roast it on a fire, on an open fire, they grind it, they brew it gently, and you end up with this amazing, it's like when your mother makes a meal, you see those people serving you coffee like a treasure. It's like something that has huge value. And to me, yeah, I hope people begin to see coffee. I think that sometimes people don't spend enough time enjoying the journey because they're too busy to get to where they want to get to. And I think that, to me, it's a waste of life because the whole purpose of life is to savor the journey, not to get to the end, especially that the end may not be all that it's cracked up to be.
Well, the middle isn't all that it's cracked up to be right now.
The middle is great. The middle, the middle is great.
The middle right now is really defining a lot of people. It's a lot of the social change that's going on. We did mention Matt Perger. We should probably talk about that, however briefly or in depth you want to talk about that. There was, excuse me, there was a situation that happened a couple months ago. It feels like it was 2 or 3 years ago now. But it was just a couple of months ago with Matt, and a situation with regards to the inappropriate divulging of details that he was told not to divulge because of a non-disclosure agreement, etc., etc. And Matt is an Eversys ambassador. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be listening to this episode of the podcast and saying, are they going to talk about that? Where does Eversys stand on the situation with Matt?
I mean, firstly, Matt has been a fantastic ambassador for us. I couldn't have wished for anyone more talented, more committed, and nicer than him. I've gotten to know him over the last 4 years, and I have huge respect for his knowledge, but I also have huge respect for who he is as a man. However, Matt is not perfect. He makes mistakes like all of us. He's a bit more in the public eye. We all make stupid mistakes, and people forget he's barely 30. When I was 30, I made far more mistakes than most people, and guess what? There was no social media, so They're not in the
Thank
public
God there
record.
wasn't social media when I was a kid.
I'll tell you a bit about Matt. When this came out, he reached out to me. I didn't reach out to him. He told me, "Look, Kamal, you need to know this. This is what's happening." Da, 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 da. And he was really crushed. He was really hurt by this. I love. Matt is a cocky young Australian successful man and all this. For him to admit and show vulnerability was a big thing. And I spoke to him. It was midnight, 1 o'clock my time, and he had sent me the letter of apology. He had published on Twitter, and he was really crushed. And then I said to him, Matt, what do you want to do? And he said, I need time. I need time and space to reassess and analyze and question myself about what people are saying. And so I need some space. So we mutually agreed that we would give him that space to breathe like a brand and reassess and recover and learn lessons and move on. And that's what we've done. And I spoke to him actually a few days ago, and he was doing really well. And I was really, really happy for him because, in my opinion, Matt is a great guy.
I have known Matt for probably, over 10 years now.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And I remember when I was getting hammered publicly because of Elixir and because of some stuff with Map It Forward a few years ago. And I was having dinner with him and I said to him, listen, I was involved with the Twilight music soundtrack, and Twilight fans are vicious as shit, but they ain't got nothing on the coffee industry. The coffee industry will take you down in a second. And I hadn't even made a mistake. All I had done was release a product into the industry that seemed to, for some reason, make people feel uncomfortable about specialty coffee. And so I said to him, I'm like, I don't understand this. I don't understand why people are attacking me. And his response to me has never left me. He said, Lee, you can't expect to have opinions about things and voice them publicly and expect nobody to say anything back.
That is true.
And it's 100% true. Where I feel that we've come from then till now is that there's no room to fuck up anymore and apologize. It's one thing if you fuck up and are unwilling to say sorry. That's one thing. But when you do screw up and you apologize and you cop to it, this is the part that I'm struggling with. Because I do know Matt, and I do know that while he lives in oceans and oceans of inherent entitlement, the fact that he does lead with that inherent entitlement doesn't mean that he is inherently, at his core, a terrible person or even a bad person. I've had enough conversations with Matt to know that Matt knows when he's fucked up and he'll apologize for when he's fucked up.
Absolutely. And he did. So yeah, I mean, the question that I wanted to ask you is this. When someone hates someone else or someone criticizes someone else, what does it say about those two people or those two things? Who is the one carrying the hatred? You see, people think if I hate something, like I hate Brussels sprouts, it's the fault of the Brussels sprouts. No, it's in me. This is something in me. People who hate have hatred in them. People who don't forgive have a lack of forgiveness in them. And they just channel that negative energy into the vessel in front of them. The vessel is not is just a recipient of someone's prejudice, not the source of it. If you
Yeah.
know what I mean.
I do, and I want to make something clear. I have a real problem in our industry that people like Matt and a lot of other inherently entitled men hold the majority of influence in our industry. I have a real issue with it that I'm trying to work through, but that doesn't stop me from saying that that's a part of a really big issue that we have as an industry. It's not the fault of the people who are operating in that space are taking advantage of a privilege that they have. This moment in history is holding them accountable to that.
Sure.
But I'm not here saying, oh, poor Matt, and we should all give Matt a break or anything like that. All I'm saying is that this is a human who fucked up, made a mistake, apologized for his mistake, and wants to do better. It doesn't matter who that human is. It doesn't matter what color that human is. It matters that we seem to be navigating a space as a species that seems to this need to cancel people out if they don't agree with the woke group. And I don't know that that's actually getting us anywhere.
It's not just in this industry.
No,
Every
it's everywhere.
industry has this. The thing is, when you make a mistake, there's always a price to pay, because without the price to pay, there is no learning. So, decisions have consequences. You have to live with those consequences, and it takes time to overcome them. If people choose to judge you or not forgive you, that is their problem. You are on your journey, they are on theirs. And you just have to focus on your journey and let them deal with their own.
Yeah, although it does become a part of your problem when it affects you professionally, right?
Well, it can if you let it. The right people, I always believe that in any world, in any industry, you've got those who matter and those that don't.
Mm-hmm.
And those who matter tend to be people who have a bit more wisdom than the masses, and they make their own decisions. They are not influenced by others. Your decisions have to be controlled by your values. And if you're someone who does not forgive, then what do you call the value that doesn't forgive? An absence of grace. It could be all of that. I have been on this planet a little while, and one thing that I have learned is I want to be someone who generates positive energy. I want to be someone who forgives, and sometimes it's hard. I want to be someone who loves, and sometimes that's hard. And I want to be someone who is generous. So because the more I am like that, the more I become like that, and the more I attract those positive energies around me. And it's amazing. What people don't realize is the more they hate, the more hate there is in them,
The more hate
and
they're generating.
The more hatred they attract.
Yeah.
There is
It's
a
group thinking.
magnetism. Yes, and there's a magnetism about those values, which eventually you reap what you sow. They say karma is a bitch, and it is.
I'm not going to lie, I'm concerned because I very much agree with what you're saying. And I'm not a positive person or a negative person, I'm a realist. And I'm concerned that if we don't start as an industry disconnecting ourselves from the need to think as a group and encourage independent thinking and encourage compassion and empathy and dissociate from this need for cancel culture, that we may end up doing our industry more harm than we do good. Because we're seeing our industry is one of the hardest hits globally in this time.
It is. No, it is. That is true. But the thing, Lee, that I wanted, being an optimism does not make me someone who is not a realist. You can
Right.
be both.
But
And
most people
I
aren't,
think that,
Kamal. Most people who are optimists are like rah-rah optimists, sugar for dinner.
no, sure, I don't live in the clouds. So my feet are firmly planted on terra firma. Gravity wins every time with me. But the thing is this, I travel all over the world. I think the hate culture, the lack of, is a minority. And those people have empty lives. They have nothing else to do but to make other people feel worse than they do. So it gives them a sense of identity. The majority of people are not like that. There are wonderful people in our coffee industry all over the world. Literally, I end up all over the world. I am made to feel so welcome by extremely generous people all over the planet. And I think that those people far exceed that minority that barks.
I agree with you. I agree with the idea that the majority of people are compassionate, well-meaning
Yeah.
people. I think what we're seeing, and I guess I'm speaking majority online, on social media, and you have made the very wise decision to not have social media accounts. It's fantastic. It's very clever.
Do you know why people criticize on social media? Because it's easy.
Yes. Oh,
You
yes.
have to be, you can be extremely brave on social media and say things about people to people that you wouldn't dare say face to face. And I think that, to me, if you can't say something in someone's face, then don't write it.
Right.
Don't say it. You've got to have the strength of your beliefs. And if you feel strongly about something, then voice it in their face. Don't make it public.
You're speaking far too logically and rationally for this era. So
I told you I was a realist.
perhaps that's why we get on so well. We both think that same kind of old school, what feels like old school ways in these days, integrity and logic and realism and, balanced open mindedness and all of that kind of stuff. They seem like old school values now.
I want to grab something you said earlier about people having a sense of entitlement. And you see that a lot today because, people are born in an era of prosperity. So people live, they all have iPhones, they all have computers, they all have food, they can all dress, they have access to healthcare. So it's easy to throw stones from that position. I have spent a lot of time in sub-Saharan Africa where they have nothing. And I'll tell you, they are the most generous people you will ever meet in your life because they have no sense of entitlement. They think that for you to like them, they have to be generous and honest and trustworthy and transparent. And to me, that works. You mentioned before about marketing or selling, distorting the truth. And it is not. The paradigm of this world is based on authenticity. If you're not authentic, eventually you get found out. If you're someone who hates everybody, eventually you get found out. If someone doesn't tell the truth, eventually you get found out. And if you base the paradigm of your life on transparency and truth, and the story that you tell is coherent with the way you behave, then, in my opinion, you live a life of integrity because everything that you do is reconciled into one.
I agree with you. I live my life that way. So you're not going to get any arguments over here. I learnt that when I was 14, I went to Syria for the first time. And it was very important for my mother to take my twin sister and I to Syria so that we could be around that energy. And at the time, sorry, say again?
There's another one of you.
Yes.
I thought when you were born, you broke the damn mold. No, there's two of you.
There is another one that looks exactly like me. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yes. People are very much freaked out when they find out that I'm an identical twin. Yes, and she's in her name's Lena, so it's Lee and Lena, and Lena is in the corporate world. So Lena's a financial controller. She's a corporate executive for a multinational company. So we followed
Who was
very similar. Sorry,
who was born first?
me by 6 minutes.
Okay.
And until we were 12 years old, we thought that she was the eldest. And then one day we had taken the baby photos out, and back then, the doctors would, or the nurses would, write the time that you were born on the back of your baby photo. And we realized then that actually I was 6 minutes older than Lena. And in the Arab world, the firstborn is a big deal. It's a big deal to be the firstborn. And let me tell you, I have claimed those 6 minutes my whole life up to that point. So anyway, when I went to Syria at 14, it hurt my stomach to say a sentence in Arabic back then. It really did. I didn't know how to speak Arabic. I was excited about meeting everyone in our village, but I'd only ever known Australia. And I spent 6 weeks in Syria, and we would go to Syria is so beautifully rich in history. You'd go to one place and you'll see, this is where in the Bible, the mountain opened up and they walked through it. Yeah, you can see that there, and you go to different places and you see fortresses that are thousands of years old, and you'll take baths in the sulfur baths, and it's fantastic. It's amazing. No matter where we went, this incredible, generous spirit was there. We went to one place called Tudmor, and I remember my uncle hired a tour guide. The taxi driver had driven us from our village a couple of hours to this place called Tudmor, this village, and we were going up to see the fortress, and we had hired a tour guide, and we had been looking around and doing touristy stuff for a couple of hours, and we had said to the tour guide, we're going to go to lunch now, we're going to take you to lunch. Could you tell us where the restaurant that we should go to is? And he said, no, I called my wife when your taxi driver asked me to be your tour guide for today, and she's at home and has got lunch prepared for us. We'd never met this man before. We'd never met his family before. And we went to his house, his wife, they're no doubt a poor family, but they had used the money that they had to go and buy meat, which is very expensive in Syria.
It is everywhere in Africa.
Yeah. She went and bought meat and made what's called a mansaf. And a mansaf is a big tray with rice and pine nuts all over it, and the shoulder from either a goat or a ghanam, like a sheep, cooked for hours and put over the top of this tray of rice. And
you're making hungry.
I won't have wine with you, but I'll make a mansaf.
I'll drink the wine.
You can drink the wine. But so we went to their house and had this mansaf. And I was just awestruck to see this generosity of this family that had never known us, but knew that we were tourists from Australia, and we'd never been to their village before, and they wanted to show us their hospitality even though they'd never met us before. This was formative in the way that I approached hospitality. When I left the corporate world to come into the coffee industry, and somebody said to me for the first time, this is the hospitality industry, the first thing I thought about was that meal that I had in that tour guide's house. And I thought, it is my responsibility to show this kind of generosity to everybody that comes into the house that I'm serving in. And it also formulated the way that I approach with, and this is going to sound corny, but I'm going to say it anyway. It informed the heart that I bring to this industry. and to my life. Because if somebody not knowing me can welcome me into their house, who am I to be suspicious of other people and their intentions when they do this? That has worked against me as well as for me, having that approach. It is, especially living in America, that
But it's
openness.
much to be like that is I think if you walk the earth with an open heart and an open mind and a generous spirit, you will attract people like you. Yes, once in a while you will be disappointed and hurt, but the times that you have a positive experience way overwhelm the small distractions that you encounter, and it's all part of becoming who you are. You know, I have been in the coffee industry for 10 years, and I have loved every minute of it. I think the people have been generous with me. You know, I know most of our competitors, and I'll tell you what, there is not a bad word exchanged between us. We're competitors, but we have huge respect. We don't criticize one another. We have coffee together, and it's just amazing. It's just amazing. You know, we go to symposiums, we go to shows, we introduce each other to people, and I think it's a fantastic family. Within any family, you will have disruptive elements, but it's part and parcel of life. Life was never meant to be perfect, and I accept it as being imperfect, and therefore things don't bother me or bother me less.
Yeah, and I think that we each have a different, not each, just you and I think every person in this industry experiences it from a unique perspective. And I think that right now we're being challenged into redefining what our industry is and redefining what the new cafe model is going to be into the future. I think we're also having to approach some challenges with our value chain, who are now witnessing the collision of two crises. They're witnessing the collision of the coffee price crisis as well as 2020, whether it be the pandemic, whether it be the economic collapse, whatever it is. All of these crises are coming together at the same time. And the people who are suffering the most from this at the moment are producers.
But they are, because obviously, if you are at the beginning of the value chain and then at the end of the value chain, people are buying, eventually you will suffer. You know, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about change.
I'd love to.
You know, because this, you know, the year that we live is unlike any year I have lived, and I haven't spoken to anyone who's told me they've lived in something more precarious than this. So these are extraordinary times. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking, okay, we can't worry about what we can't control, you know, because we have no control over that.
Right.
So what can we control? What is it that we can do that actually can make a difference in our lives today? So when thinking of change, I was thinking, okay, there's three elements to change. There is the anticipation of change. You know, we should always live with what ifs, you know, scenarios. Although this no one anticipated, we need to be prepared. So if you look at a surfer, a good surfer surfing a wave, he anticipates the wave, prepares for that wave. So when the wave arrives, he knows exactly how to time his move, so he surfs. And if you time it wrong, you crash. You also have to be not only anticipating change, you need to embrace change. You know, some people who don't like change, they're so ensconced into their own habits, they just hate change. And you also have to adapt. You know, if you look at our world today, the pace of change has accelerated in every single industry at every single level of life. And you need to adapt. You know, and it's a little bit like, you know, if you ski downhill, you will gather pace. You know, and you could get out of control and fall, or you can embrace So you anticipate the pace, you embrace it, and you adapt to it. And then you enjoy the ride. So if you look at our coffee industry, you know, it hasn't been static for the last 10 years. It has changed enormously since I've been into it. I think changes in equipment, new products on the market, new store concept, they have robots, they have all sorts of things. And I think it's those who anticipate, embrace, and adapt that will do well, not just in the coffee industry in their work, but in the whole of their life. So we as manufacturers are no different. We have to anticipate change. So we have to study trends. We have to think to ourselves, what does the market need, want, what are their pain points? And then we have to embrace that. Even though where we are may not be where the market is going, we think, well, that's where they're going. We need to anticipate and move ahead. And we need to adapt. We can't be static. Forget, maybe 50 years ago, the pace of change moved into 10 or 20-year cycles. Now, it could be every year. 20 years ago, car companies launched a new car every 3 years. Now it's every year. Maybe it's going to become every 3 months. So if you don't anticipate, embrace, and adapt, you will be left behind. And that would be sad.
Given the relationship that people have with different concepts that are being questioned right now, concepts like capitalism, concepts like justice and social justice and consumerism, what do you think the relationship between those concepts and change are right now?
I like to think about things in simple ways. Capitalism is just a belief system.
Is a what system, sorry?
It's a belief system. All of those things are developed by politicians, and it creates a belief system. I think that, to me, the common denominator of everything that we do in our lives is down to two things. It's about people and it's about products. So you can apply that to any industry you want. It's the people, the products. You can also look at circumstance, you can look at all of that. In the coffee industry, it's an amazingly dynamic industry. Why is that? Most of the people involved in it are young. So the future is, you could see, whatever the young people spend their time on is where the future is. What do young people like? They love the coffee industry, they embrace technology. I think the people today are maybe less ambitious than we were, when I was their age, because they want to enjoy their life. Maybe when I was thinking about security and all these things that I learned from my parents.
Can I interrupt you there? Do you think it's
Yeah.
Do you think it's that they want to enjoy life more, or do you think that it's perhaps that they see that the model's broken and that they don't see the longevity that we hoped we saw when we were younger?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, everyone is born in somebody else's story. So when you're born in somebody else's
story. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, so when I was born, I had a choice. I arrived in my parents' story. So I arrived into their chaos.
Right.
Post-war Algeria, blah, 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 and I had two choices. I can perpetuate that story. I can create my own. I chose to create my own. A lot of people perpetuate that story. And I think that we have a lot more choice and determination and power than we think we have. A lot of times we submit to circumstances when we should fight. And it's amazing that when you fight, it's like a butterfly that was a larva in a cocoon. Maybe it should have stayed in it.
Look at that. Look at the change just right there. Well done.
You have transformed it. It could have stayed in the cocoon. There was nothing wrong with being in the cocoon and being a larva. But it had a greater vision. It believed for more and became a butterfly. And if you have that perspective in your life, whether you are a barista, a shop owner, whatever it is that you are, and you hope and think for more, you can achieve far more. Because it is my belief that if you want change in your life, you have to see it in your head first, in your mind. You have to believe in what you see, and then you have to put into place the actions that enable you to reach your goal.
When have you done that in your life? Can you recall that you felt that you were up against something that was difficult and you had to pivot or change in that situation?
The whole of my life. I mean, I'll give you a story. I told you already I grew up in North Africa, and I didn't like it. When I grew up in a French home, all of a sudden I could see the country changing. I was not feeling that my environment reflected who I was. So I wanted to leave. Okay, 19 years old, 18 years old, no money. How do you go? So I realized there's only one way out, and that's to win an academic scholarship to go
Okay.
study abroad. And so my professors in high school were shocked because I was an average student that in the last year became one of the best students in the class. I became a butterfly because I had a goal and I wanted a academic scholarship to go study in the US. And then the whole of my life, I've had to fight. I didn't want to leave the US, but obviously I couldn't get a green card, so I ended up in the UK because I had a French passport. So, and then you have to adapt again to a new life. I didn't know anything about the UK, and I have made a great life. And then when the economic crisis happened, my world collapsed.
Which economic crisis are we talking about?
In 2008 and
Yeah,
9,
the most recent one.
my company folded. I didn't have anything, and I was struggling. And I thought, you have to reimagine yourself. You have to go back to basics and think: am I a victim or am I an overcomer? Am I someone who's going to remain static? Am I someone who believes that I can impact my future through
Yeah.
choice? Yes. And then you basically begin to believe. And at the beginning, you may not have a vision because you are in a bad place, but you've got to get yourself out of that.
It's a muscle,
And you've
right?
got,
That you have to build.
it is, it is. When I started with Eversys in 2011, Eversys, launched its first machine. And the world looked at us thinking, oh, who are these guys? We come up with a two-group super automatic machine, the most expensive machine in the world. And we thought, well, I don't know why people don't like us.
Gee, I can
It was
relate to that.
And I remember the many, many days we're working tons of hours, ending up with a pizza at the end of the day or at Jean Paul's house for cheese and a glass of wine. These were tough days,
Yeah.
but we look at hardship like a bad thing.
No, I don't.
But
I think it's
it
wonderful
is
for character building.
it is wonderful for character building as long as it's in measure, that you don't have it all the time.
Yeah.
It's like seasons. You don't want to have it winter all the time. So we saw that and we fought. Why did we fight? What made us what we are today? We had a very clear vision. We had great passion. We had a great team. We absolutely supported. We were as one with different skills, with a clear vision, and we put a huge amount of energy into the pot and fought and fought and fought and never quit. And there were times, I tell you, where it was really, really precarious. People who come to Eversys now see the brand new factory, 200 employees, clients all over the world. You know, they don't appreciate what we went through to get to where we are. Would I have preferred coming into Eversys today and eliminate those 6 to 8 years of hardship? No, because they have
They're formative.
determined, yes, yes, yes.
Being able to influence when the sword is being forged, you know, when the metal is being heated and shaped and all of that, there's a special kind of bond that you form with a brand, with the people that helped build it at that time.
Because you fought in the crucible. But see, sorry to interrupt you,
No,
Lee,
go
but
ahead.
I was when I look at things, you know, in a way, because we've gone through the crucible, we've gone through the pain, and we've given birth to something of value, we have the right to influence the narrative. You know,
Yeah, I do know.
and
More than you can understand, I know.
to me, in our narrative, you know, you mentioned the role of the barista and all that. We don't want to change that. You know, we want highly motivated and skilled individuals to express themselves. I was doing a talk in Kiev last year, and someone said, "Oh yeah, super automatic machines will get rid of the
No, they
baristas."
won't.
And I gave them an image. I said, "The machine is an instrument. The barista is the musician, and the coffee is the music. We're just the instrument. So we are putting an instrument in the hands of a musician for that musician to create music. And I hope it's not acid rock."
It's going to be, well, it is an opportunity for us to create a new model that benefits all stakeholders.
But it's this, you see, if you put, you know, I was doing a bit of research and I was thinking, you know, it's like when the electric guitar was invented. All the guys who played acoustic guitar, they say, well, you know, those guys are the bad guys. No. You know, it just, if you're a good player on an acoustic guitar, you're a good player on an electric guitar. You utilize.
Ish. You're speaking to a musician here, so
I'm not.
I am.
But
The mechanics are sort of similar with regards to certain things, but, you know, there's an adaptation required.
you, in anything, you see, so if a barista, you know, I remember I have challenged many baristas who are very proficient on traditional machine to use our machine. I don't have to give them a guide. I don't, because they understand it. Intuitively, they understand it. You see, a great musician understands a great instrument. You don't have to give them a how-to guide.
I think,
You know, and that's what I mean.
I think that a challenging part that we're going to see as we move forward as an industry in trying to understand what the new model is people's ambivalence towards the idea of being put out of a job. Coronavirus has put the majority of our workforce out of a job. The fear that a super automatic machine is going to mean that they're no longer going to have a job to go back to, I think is a fallacy. I think if we can help people understand that no matter what you think the future of the coffee industry is going to look like, it needs to be one that enables success for all the stakeholders. And the model that we were currently operating in didn't. Coffee producers weren't getting paid the right amount of money. Businesses were operating at 3% net profit, if they're lucky. People weren't getting paid enough money as a livable wage. And their wage was being compensated by their customers, which really strips them of dignity, in my opinion. And I think we need to fix that. And I think that one part of that solution is elevating the barrier to entry for our industry with regards to the knowledge base.
I mean, I don't disagree with you, but I think, you know, with Eversys, we never think when we manufacture our machines, we're going to take people out of their jobs. We want to do the opposite. We want to make our machines accessible so more people have jobs. You know, to use an Eversys machine, you don't need to be, you know, you can create a product by yourself. You know, we have people in our company who come and we teach them how to make products. They're not going to be as proficient as the top level baristas, but at least they can make a decent coffee. And that's what we try to do. We try to make coffee, great coffee, accessible to a larger audience. I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. You work in an office. It doesn't make sense for people to have a coffee shop in an office and a barista to sit down when they only need to work part of the time. So we offer a solution where people can make their own coffee and they can be creative. We have different ways you can make milk. You can make milk by using a standard steam one like a barista does. You can make the machine help you make the milk, which a lot of baristas use things today, like Uber Milk, that does the same thing. You can change the parameters of the machine to adjust to the flavor profile you want the coffee to have. So we give you the ability and the flexibility to do what you want and make coffee more accessible, which means more people will be drinking coffee, which means more jobs, which means a greater circular economy.
Yeah, and I think that what I'd like to do is help people understand that the idea of automation enables more opportunity for people who are baristas in looking at what their own individual future could look like. And I think I'm going to cop a bit of shit for that, but I'm fine with that. This is an idea. What's new? What I mean by that is we have a workforce that's been put out of business. We have day by day an accelerating number of businesses that are going out of business. Some of it because we need that to happen. They've been running businesses that have been struggling for many, many years, and they just needed something that was going to help them close quicker. And it's so unfortunate that we're seeing that happen. But I feel that this is probably a good thing for them. It's letting them off the hook. But the deeper we get into this situation, the more likely we're going to see businesses that have been operating well be forced to close. So, recently we released an episode of the Daily Coffee Pro that was the reality of 2020 for cafe owners. And this is going to be a situation whereby, sure, in the beginning of this crisis, cafes are closing because they weren't being run well anyway. And this kind of was the straw that broke the camel's back. But the deeper that we get into this, the businesses that were being run well are going to fall victim to this situation purely because no business run at 3% net profit is going to be able to withstand 6 to 12 months of operating at, on the high side, 50% of what they were operating at when they were running at 3% net profit. None of our businesses have those kinds of cash reserves unless they're VC funded. It's simply not the way our industry runs. As we evolve, to use your caterpillar analogy, as we evolve from this crisis, I'd like to see a lot of people that were put out of work consider the way that they may be self-sufficient moving forward, in the way that they may be able to set up small businesses, very, very small businesses that have a goal of simply just hiring themselves. And if what you're doing is setting up a business, a very small business that has an automatic machine whereby you're required to just build relationships with customers, and 90% of what you used to do as a barista is taken care of by the machine, especially given that most of your customers are going to be ordering cappuccinos with 2 sugars. We have the potential for a new business model to be shaping itself.
I think you've you've opened a very important topic. I mean, the first and foremost thing is this: a business is only a business if it makes money.
Right.
And to me, a business that doesn't operate within what I call the bandwidth of what a business is not a business. It's an activity, it's a
It's
charity,
just
it's
a
whatever it
brand.
is. It's not a business. So you need, and I think what this situation does is two things. It gives you a cold appraisal of what you do because reality sets in. Numbers won't lie. And then out of that, you can either reinvent yourself, and because at times like this is when creativity flourishes.
100%.
And I think, like as an example, in Eversys, people always say, oh, it's not a good thing if Kamal spends a lot of time on a plane or when he goes on holiday because he has time to come up with ideas. I come back with like a whole bucket load of ideas. And over the last few months, I had plenty of time on my hands, and I was asked to do a 3-year plan. And normally that would take me 9 months. Well, it took 2 weeks. The team and I put together a commercial plan, and within that, I was trying to think, how can we reimagine our world? And what you will see is next month we are launching a whole new suite of products.
Oh, I can't wait
Really
to hear what
innovative
they're about.
solutions, really innovative solutions. And when I mean innovative, some people, I saw someone put something on LinkedIn this week. He said, oh, this is a disruptive solution. But it's not for you to say if it's disruptive or not disruptive. Let the market determine whether it's disruptive or not. But we think we've pushed the boundaries of creativity in every single aspect, in design, in taste, in making things accessible to more people. And we're launching this. And this article will be published in Global Coffee Report. I had to give a shout out to Sarah Baker, the editor, because she told me that's what you do on podcasts. You
Absolutely.
give shout out.
You're handling this podcast very well. I must say, it's highly enjoyable to have this conversation with you.
So you think as a virgin I'm doing
You're
pretty
doing
well.
great.
It is this, like I said, you could do rabbits in the headlights or you can reimagine your landscape. And that's what we did. So I'm really excited. We're launching really, really cool products. And yesterday I was in Amsterdam showing our new products to a client and they just couldn't believe it. And then today I was in London with our UK team. And our CEO came from Switzerland, and we showed them the new things, and their jaw hit the floor. And that's when you know that the work that you've done is good, because you see your peers and your friends recognize it, and they will be honest. If they don't like it, we have guys like Ilya, he will tell you.
Oh, I can't imagine Ilya kind of not saying it. That's what I love about him is like you don't wonder where you stand with Ilya.
Oh, no. He will tell you, Kamal, this is a shit show. Straight out of the book, and you respect it. And I guess I'm a realist. I want to know where I stand. I don't want to live in a fantasy world. So if my business is not making money, I either close the door and reinvent myself, go do something else. And we live in a world of untold possibilities. Guess what? Tomorrow you wake up and you have another chance. It's a brand new day. It's a fresh start. You haven't made any decisions yet. You haven't screwed that day up yet. Start, like I said before, wake up half an hour earlier, have your cup of coffee. Begin your day in the right way. Find your peace.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate of choice and taking responsibility for the choices that you've made, knowing that there are external forces that could influence that. And a lot of that has informed my work in leadership and the coaching that I do around leadership. And I believe that all great leaders start by leading themselves. And you cannot become a good leader if you're not any good at leading yourself. And that is the hardest journey to start every single day, in saying, if you've not done it before, is what I should have prefaced that with. If you haven't learnt how to lead yourself and be responsible for your own actions and be accountable to yourself for your own happiness and success and life currencies, doing that for other people is going to be, it's a non-starter. It's simply not possible to do it effectively. You'll get found out sooner or later.
I'll give you a definition of a leader I really liked.
Tell me.
I think I heard it about 25 years ago. Someone said a leader is someone that people follow.
I have a problem with that. But I'm sure you're not shocked by that.
No, because if you're a leader, people will follow you. And if you're not, they won't. You can call yourself what you like.
And I have a problem with it because it's true. And I have this strange relationship with words, well, with definitions and actualities like that. And the idea of something like fame and the relationship that fame seems to be having with leadership right now, because people are following influencers. People are following people who are famous. They don't tend to be following people who are showing leadership that is valuable to our society. But who the fuck am I to be deciding what's valuable to our society or not anyway? Do you know what I mean?
You're entitled to your opinion, but these are two different things. To me, a genuine leader is someone which will please you, who doesn't have to market his or herself, because they lead. The light shines. When the light hits the darkness, guess what happens? Darkness retreats. And the second part is we live in a world, unfortunately, where form is valued over substance. So we allow people with very little talent to not only have an opinion, but we give them the platform to voice their opinion.
Which is leadership.
Yes, but if you allow those people to speak and you give them the platform and you listen to them, you're basically encouraging a negative thing to become bigger. So to me, you have control. If you believe that you have two ears and one mouth, and you listen to all that stuff that goes into your mind, that can influence your values, it can influence the way you think. The way you think controls your actions, which then forms a behavior, which forms your character, which impacts the whole of your life and determines your destiny. Shut it down at the source.
Which is why it is so fucking important for us as individuals, not just as an industry, everybody across the world, to start thinking for themselves.
Me, you swear a lot.
And I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that too.
Excellent.
It sounds much better coming from you than from me.
Well, you're welcome to speak the way that you want to speak, and I'll speak the way that I want to speak, and then we'll just have a great conversation.
I read something really interesting last week, and I'll share that with you. That's okay.
Go ahead.
I was thinking that at a time like this, the first thing that comes to people's mind is worry. People worry about the future. And I was looking it up. In the Greek, the definition of the word worry is having a divided mind.
Having a divided mind. Individually or collectively?
No, as an individual.
Okay.
If you worry, you have a divided mind. You see, as human beings, and I think most of us are humans, I haven't met any zombies, there's two drives. There is fear and there is hope.
Uh-huh.
And a worry is when you're split between the two. So you worry because you don't know whether to follow the path of hope or to follow the path of fear. And it is a choice. That's the amazing thing, is people don't realize it's actually a choice.
Uh-huh.
You decide which path you follow. So if you want to stop worrying, choose the path of hope. And I don't mean empty hope, false hope, and all of that. I believe in everything that you do in life. You need to have a clear vision, and that's not enough. Because the difference between a dreamer and a visionary is the visionary has a plan. So you need to have a vision, You need a plan, you need a strategy, and you need to execute, you need to persevere, you need to have discipline, you need to have all of those things. But when you do that, and you do that repeatedly, it's what you said before. It's like a muscle. You know, the more you practice, the luckier you become.
And the relationship, I'm a firm believer that having a relationship with friction that's healthy is an important part of that equation. Some people, you know, to speak to your idea of worry, people may think that worry is a part of that friction. I've done a lot of hard things in my life, and by hard things, I define that as things that I have no business doing, and I do them anyway. You know, going on big, grand vision quests to become a musician and start a podcast and launch an innovative brand and all of that kind of stuff that I have no idea how to do.
Yeah, but you know, Lee, this is what I love about you. You know, you are not afraid to make a decision
No.
and to take.
I have to correct you there.
Well, you are afraid.
People make the very incorrect statement of saying you're fearlessly. No. I live most of my life with one foot in fear and one foot in excitement. So I'm never unafraid.
It's not a bad place to be. You know, before
Right.
I came on your podcast today, I was talking to some friends. I said, I'm a bit nervous. I was talking to my wife, Tracy, and I said, I'm a bit nervous. She says, why? Just take it like a chat.
It is
And I
just a
said,
conversation.
yeah, but it's live. I said, so if you say something stupid, you know, it's like forever ingrained in social media. And I was a bit nervous. But I think being nervous is that friction you talk
Exactly.
about. It's a healthy thing.
Exactly. And that's what I mean by being like, people give me too much credit in saying that, you know, you're not afraid. Are you joking? I wish that were true. I wish that were true. Most of the things that I do, I am afraid. But I also...
You know,
Go ahead.
sorry to interrupt. You know, with Eversys, we're launching these new products, and I was presenting a 3-year plan a couple of weeks ago. And one of the questions came back. I said, are you nervous? Yes. Because every time you expose your creative work,
That's it there.
you're taking a huge risk because you're giving other people the power to opine.
To have
to give
opinions.
you to have opinion. I think opinions are overrated. Way overrated. I think you should give things to people, and people should say, this is the best thing I've ever seen.
I think that we suffer as a community of not wanting to elevate people because we have cognitive dissonance that what other people are doing is shining a light on our own inadequacies, when that's not what's happening. That's really not what's happening when other people try to do things. And this is where I want to, you know, what I was saying about this idea of friction is that I've done so many things that all of my core programming told me I had no business doing, because I'm a woman, because I'm not smart enough, because I don't have the, you know, all of the reasons I shouldn't have done all the things that I have done. And the one thing that I've learned is it's a mindset. You have to build a relationship with yourself whereby your relationship with friction is bordering on the edge of being too much. So you don't want to get into this space whereby the amount of friction that you have in your life is unbearable. But you also don't want to have it so that the amount of friction you have in your life is comfortable, because then you're not going to excel. And it's a certain kind of person who's willing to accept friction into their life all the time.
But I don't see friction as a friend.
Really?
You know, so no, you know, I am not someone who is a glutton for pain, you know, but I don't ignore it and I don't avoid it. You know, so if I think I have to go through pain to improve or to get something valuable, I'm not afraid to do that. But I will not seek it as a matter of course. So, I was thinking when you were talking about the game of golf, which I play. And when you play golf, one day, even a professional can be 10 shots difference from one day to the other. Why? Because there is self-doubt. You've got a club in your hand, a little white ball, and there's an ocean between you and the green. And you're looking at the water. My wife always looks at the water. I said, don't look at the water. If you look at the water, that's where your ball
That's
is
where your
going to go.
focus is.
Look at the green. And I think you don't know with 100% certainty that your ball is going to go where you aimed. But when it does, it's like you feel the most exhilarating feeling, even though in my case, it doesn't happen often. I live for those moments.
It's called a flow state, right? And it reminds me of our first conversation. And you said to me, it actually may have been our second conversation, where you recommended a book, Synchronicity, when I started telling you what the way I kind of live my life is. And I listened to that book over the weekend, and you were 100% right. That is,
Great.
This idea of friction and the relationship that friction has to doing hard things, to achieving extraordinary things, and this kind of surrender to the process. This surrender to, it's like this unspoken language that flow state has. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I mean, if you look, I have two dogs. As a matter of fact, I'm absolutely shocked that they haven't barked. Maybe they're listening to the podcast. I'm going to ask them at the end, did Daddy do well? But, when you look at dogs, and I've never had dogs before. So I've had 4 dogs, and this is my second 2. They're amazing. The dogs are super loyal, and they never doubt the fact that you're going to feed them and that you're going to take care of them. They have absolutely full trust. If you look at the animal world, it's the same. There is a balance, there is an expectation, and we worry. So we are the smart guys that have been put, to have dominion over the planet, and we're the ones that worry, and the alleged lesser creatures don't. So to me, they believe in a certain order and a certain, synchronicity, serendipity in the world we live in, and we don't, because we allow our mind to be divided, and we allow worry to infiltrate our makeup and determine our actions to quite a large extent. When you stop doing that and you tune yourself to the rhythm, because this world has a rhythm, and you attune yourself to it, it's amazing. If you stop worrying about things, you realize actually they were not that important. I'm going to stop with those negative voices. Do I miss them? No. I'm going to stop watching those stupid films, reading the stupid newspaper. I'm just going to focus and be really careful. It's a bit like nutrition. Instead of nutrition of the body, it's nutrition of the mind,
100%.
nutrition of the heart, nutrition of the spirit. And you just only put into things in that have value, and then all of a sudden you realize that whichever you've put in determines to a larger extent what you become.
This is where I started to build a difficult relationship with marketing, because it seemed that marketers were competing for people's attention, and the world turned clickbaity. And so the diet that they were giving to consumers was toxic. And it seems that the conversations come full circle in that was, I go into every conversation with an open mind and the hope of being pleasantly surprised. And I was with you as a marketer. And one of my best friends is a marketer, so I don't have a general dislike for marketers. I have a general distaste for the direction that most marketing has gone when it comes to trying to grab people's attention, because it seems to be cultivating a community that is fear-filled. There's and you know, we talk about fear and friction and things like that. There's different kinds of fear, and the kind of fear that, you know, in one of our conversations, I was telling you about an important decision that I've recently made, and it scares the shit out of me because it's something that I don't know how to do, and I'm going to embark on the journey of figuring out how to do this thing that I'm not speaking about publicly yet, but over the next 12 months. And I sought your counsel on some of it. And I was telling you that this feels like a delicious kind of fear and a very privileged kind of fear to be experiencing in 2020, because I was in control of this kind of fear, as opposed to all the other kind of fear that showed up in 2020 that seemed to be external from me and pushed on me. And navigating the friction around that versus the friction around COVID-19 and the protests and riots and global financial collapse and all of that seems to be a kind of friction that seems to be shouted at me if I tap into the media and if I tap into conversations with the wrong kind of people. Versus the kind of fear that I'm approaching with this decision that I've made. And I have to, now I'm upping the rate of friction that I'm choosing by doing this new thing. And this idea of going back to the Serendipity book that you recommended, remind me the name of the author. Jaworski?
Jaworski.
Yeah.
He was involved in Watergate.
Yeah, his father. His father was the head prosecutor in Watergate. And when you look at this idea of synchronicity and the idea of the kind of friction that you choose versus the kind of friction, and insert the word fear into friction if you like, it's a similar kind of thing. The kind of friction or fear that you choose to step into versus the kind of fear or friction that can be imposed on you, and your mindset and relationship to those kinds of things is, I think, something that our industry could perhaps do well in pondering on right now, because there seems to be a lot of that enforced on us or imposed on us right now. And if we can find a way to ponder on that friction, we may very well find the innovation and creative solutions to the situations that we're being posed with right now. Does that make sense?
It does. At the beginning, you were talking about marketing people, and it sort of gave me a thought. You see, people think what a marketing person does is to make you want something that you don't need, and it makes you want to become a person that you're not. So they create a standard and say, if you don't wear Air Jordan shoes, yeah, and you don't have this hat and you don't do this, and basically you become a robotic society where everyone is exactly the same, a little clone. Mm-hmm. And it's not. You know, I always think that, to me, it is our responsibility. We cannot abdicate the responsibility of becoming who we are and assume that someone else, a clever marketing, will make us into something only if we let them. And we only let them, see, we only allow someone to make us something that we're not if we don't know who we are. But if you know who you are, like if I go to my dog and I say, you're a cat, he's going to say, well, I'm not a cat, you know, and it's the same thing. You know, you talk about our industry, and I think in really basic things, a business is something that offers a product that people want in an environment that is conducive to communication, creating community at a price they can afford in a consistent manner, and hopefully they will control their costs and their revenues will exceed their costs so they can call themselves a business. So if I was opening a coffee shop today, I would think, okay, where do I begin? I want to begin and find a location where there are people, a lot of people. Then I'm going to create a brand that people are going to relate to. I'm going to call it, I'll give you an example. In Texas, Austin, Texas, there's this guy just this year in the middle of COVID who decided my customers can't come to me. So I'm going to go to them. He created a cool brand called the Coffee Bandit. He put
That's
one of
fantastic.
he put one of our machines in a van and went to the
Yeah.
people. So you can't come to me, I'm coming to you. How creative is that?
Exactly. This is the kind of innovation. Go ahead, sorry.
What were his overheads? No rent, no staff, just him. Fuel in America is cheap. And he just drove around a bit like the ice cream man of old. You know, the ice cream man with that little music that drove you
I
nuts.
remember.
And all,
Soft serve with
all
sprinkles. Are you kidding me with that stuff? It was
Yeah.
amazing on a Sunday.
And it is this, we need to go back to basics, to the things that made us happy and made us smile. So when we create products, one of the things you said before, as a company, we want to put a smile on people's face. So what do people want? They want something delicious. They want it fast. They want to be able to afford it in an environment that they like, or if they want to take it back to their office, they can. So it's about providing people flexibility. So in the midst of change or a pandemic, you can't be dictatorial and say to them, this is my formula, and you have to do this. You have to widen the boundaries of the possible. What we do. So we say to people, we create solutions that enable you to have coffee wherever you like. So it's great coffee anywhere, anytime, by anyone.
Yeah. I'm excited because I have a fundamental belief that our industry is filled with incredibly creative thinkers.
It sure is. It absolutely is.
Go ahead.
So there is an integrity. There are people that make podcasts like you, and I've never been on one, but I watch a few once in a while, and I'm amazed by their integrity. People like James Hoffman has done some analysis on our product and other products, and when he's wrong, he says, "I'm wrong." And I have huge respect for people like that, and they're people I would go and listen to because of their integrity. And I think that when people do this, it's really contagious. You're attracted to truth. So everyone's attracted to light. You turn a light on and all the animals come. I always say in Africa, if you want to throw a party, light a fire and put a bit of music and everybody comes. It's a bit more complicated. Because why? Because people worry. In Africa, they don't worry. They think there's a fire, there's a bit of music, I'm invited, I go. In the West, they think, do I have to buy a ticket? Am I dressed properly?
Yes.
Is it safe? Where do I park? It's too complex.
Yeah. What political party are they aligned with? Are they wearing masks? Are they not wearing masks?
Yes, I'm used to this wearing mask things, and I have to be honest, I do it, but I don't like it.
But what you just said there is the point. You don't like it, but that's not stopping you from giving a shit about other people enough to wear it.
And I do. I really care about people. I respect their space. And also, I travel, so I come home. I don't want to infect my wife and the people I love, and I just don't want to do that. So you have to be very, very conscious. We all know that men have lesser, reduced cleaning habits compared to the beautiful women.
I support that statement.
And let me tell you, I wash my hands more per day than I used to per week. I mean, with gel, antiseptic thing. You go on a plane, they give you all these things, and I use them all. Don't touch your face,
Yeah.
and I follow them all. I follow them all out of respect for the environment and the people I interface with. Maybe not so much for me.
But maybe a little bit for yourself because we don't know
No,
enough, right?
no, and yes, I mean, as a man, my wife will tell you, you're not bad. You've got pretty good grooming habits. So I take that as a compliment because I mean, when she takes out the bleach and wears the gloves, the dogs and we
Run.
disappear. We're gone because we're going to get caught.
She'll
We're
start
going to get
wiping you down as well.
definitely going to get wiped
Yeah.
down. So we're off grid.
We, just like that, have done 2 hours, which is just not surprising that it went
That,
so quickly.
that is because you're so fascinating.
I'm fascinated with your conversation, sir. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. I hope you'll come back again.
If invited,
And you'll be invited. It's going to be fun to see where this idea of super automatic takes our industry into the future. And you know, one thing that we want to do is we want to document the history of our industry through conversations on this podcast, and this is a part of that. This is, you know, the first step in doing that with regards to automation.
you see, I don't want to talk about super automatics anymore because a super automatic it's something that's automatic and therefore lacks spirit or soul, and sometimes is even associated with inferior quality. I want to start the dialogue and use a narrative based on super traditional, which means this. You take what is traditional and you add technology to make it even greater. You know, go back to the image I gave you before. The barista is the maestro. The machine is just the instrument. And the coffee is the music.
What a perfect spot to end a great conversation. Thank you so much, Kamal. And where can people look up? I mean, it's in the show notes. The website is in the show notes, but do you want to mention the website for everybody?
www.eversys.com, and you know we've got an office in New York, you know, with the Eversys USA Inc. Eversys Inc. We have an office in the UK. We have an office in Hong Kong, and you can see everything on eversys.com. We want to be in a dialogue with people who are passionate about coffee, who are passionate about business, and people who have values and want to make a difference in this world. So don't worry, do not have a divided mind.
Peace, love, and peanut butter, everyone. Thanks again, Kamal. This was a great conversation. Can't wait for the next one.
You're most welcome.
Bye, mate.
Have a great day. Bye.